So, yeah. The first Doom game, although it has its issues, is still a solid FPS title that is still enjoyable to this day. As you already know, Doom became a hit in the 90s, and the game ended up selling around 3.5 million copies, and even more people played it on shareware, where the episodes were first released for free. So, of course, the next logical step for the ID Software to take was to make a sequel, and they did just that. Literally just 10 months after the original release, ID Software released Doom 2 Hell on Earth. Doom 2 came out on September 30th, 1994, and like its predecessor, it was critically acclaimed by many critics and consumers. I think it's safe to say that Doom 2 is indeed a good game. But is it a good sequel? What does it add to the game and the overall gameplay that the first title had? And does the game fix important issues its predecessor had? Well, let's find out as I take a look at the game for myself. What it does right, what it does wrong, and everything in between. Welcome to the second video in my Doom Marathon, where I'll be reviewing Doom 2 Hell on Earth. Now, like Doom 1, Doom 2 doesn't really have much of a plot. It's relatively straightforward and doesn't give you that much context, but the plot is as follows. After Doomguy defeats the Spider Mastermind at the end of the first game, he returns to Earth only to find out that the demons of Hell are currently invading Earth with the majority of the population wiped out. Doomguy then sets off to help the rest of humanity escape this hellish nightmare and to stop the invasion of Earth. And that's basically all there is to it. Again, the game does have text screens throughout the game that give further context on your next goal, but that's as much as you will get. There are slightly more of these walls of exposition throughout the game since it's no longer split into different episodes, but besides that, Doom 2 really doesn't have much to improve on the storytelling. Which, as I explained in the last video, is completely fine. A game isn't required to have any sort of plot relevance to be good, but I at least kinda expected them to improve on it in some aspects, or at least that's what I would expect with a sequel. Despite this, it means pretty much nothing and doesn't affect the game negatively at all, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Doom 2, like its predecessor, just starts off with you selecting your difficulty, and then you are plopped straight into the game with your pistol. The first level basically shows you the ropes and how certain game functions work. Everything that was in the first game is also in this one, like all the previous weapons, enemies, mechanics, even the graphics are the exact same. The gameplay loop pretty much stays the same as well, with a whole variety of demons to kill and goodies to find while you explore and find secrets hidden in a level. However, there is of course some new additions to the game. Like for starters, the most obvious addition is the 30 brand new levels played throughout the course of the game. And in these levels, there are tons to explore, tons of demons to slaughter, and tons of more ground to cover as a majority of these levels are significantly larger than the first game. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this game no longer follows an episode format. Kind of. Instead of levels being split into different episodes, they are now just split into 3 different sections. The first 1/3 of the levels being the starport, the second 1/3 being in a city, and the last 1/3 taking place in Hell itself. The best part about this is that now all the levels are in one singular sequence, meaning you play from map 1 to map 30 without having to switch to another episode after 8 or so levels. This is much better than what was done previously, as now any items and weapons you have gathered along the game now stay with you throughout your whole journey instead of being reverted back to just your pistol at the start of each episode. Overall, this is already a substantial improvement over the last game. But what else does Doom 2 improve or add? Now, in terms of weapons, there isn't much that was really added here. Only one new addition to the arsenal, which is the almighty Super Shotgun. Now, this damn thing, is legendary. It's pretty much just a normal shotgun, but with double the pellet shots, meaning double the damage. It can easily turn the tide of most situations like taking out a large group of enemies in one blast, or taking out some of the larger baddies with ease. This thing is an absolute powerhouse, and it is awesome. The only downsides this thing really has is that it is pretty ineffective at long ranges because of its large spread, and it takes double the ammo per shot. But the ammo issue is normally not really an issue mostly. As much as I love this absolute beast of a weapon, it unfortunately does make some of the other weapons pretty obsolete now, especially the normal shotgun. But still, the weapon alone makes up for the lack of any other new guns, so I'll definitely give it that. As for the already existing weapons, they basically function the same as they always did. Nothing much to say about them other than the fact that they just aren't as used as much due to the Super Shotgun dominating. Except the BFVG 9000 of course, which ends up becoming much more useful, which I'll talk about why later. Now, let's talk about level design. As I said earlier, there are 30 brand new levels in the base game, which is about as many levels the first game had. Now, do these levels fare well with Doom 1's levels? Well, now don't get me wrong, these levels are great. In fact, I think a majority of them are better than the levels found in Doom 1. There are still tons to explore and find, a lot of levels are still decently big. Not only that, the level themes are more distinct this time around since the game splits itself across 3 different areas. However, remember in the previous video how I was talking about how frustrating the levels can be and how much backtracking you might have to do sometimes? Well, unfortunately, a lot of the levels feel this way this time around. Whether you're spending your time trying to get a key card or finding a secret, you'll be spending quite a good chunk of the game trying to figure out what to do or where to go rather than slaying demons. This can especially be a problem with how spacious some of the levels can be, which also makes some of these levels feel kinda empty at times. Not only this, but some of the levels can be gimmicky, which isn't all bad. Like one level named Barrels of Fun has a crap ton of barrels spread throughout the level, so you always have to either be careful or run for your life as they explode all around you. It's a fun level and is one of my personal favorites, but there is also another level called Tricks and Traps, where you spawn at the center of the map with a bunch of rooms surrounding you. But each room mostly consists of fighting a huge load of demons for some reason. I don't enjoy this level all too much, but it does teach you one thing, one essential skill you need to complete Doom 2. Which is to always, and I mean always, be prepared for the worst at all times. With that in mind, now I want to talk about the enemies and how they contribute to the level design this time around. So, this game actually introduces a good range of new enemy types to worry about, and oh boy. These brand new enemies change up how you're going to approach certain situations in a lot of ways. Some examples like the Revenant, which shoots projectiles that have a 50% chance to home in on you, Pain Elementals, which are like the Cacodemons but instead shoot lost souls at you, making your life a living hell, because lost souls are very annoying to deal with. I hate them a lot. Maybe that's why they are called Pain Elementals, because they mentally bring me pain every time I encounter one. And of course, the most infamous of them all, the Archviles. Now, these guys, these damn demons, they're terrible. They're just awful. I hate them. I hate dealing with them. They're terrible to deal with, and I'm going to explain why. The best way I can describe their attack is like hit scan, but instead of being hit by a bullet, you're just being full on zapped, and you take massive damage. The only way to avoid the attack is just to get out of line of sight before it fully hits you. But wait, that's not all. They can also resurrect other demons if a body is near, meaning you have to deal with them quickly or else it will start resurrecting demons you already killed and wasting more of your ammo. They also have a pretty substantial amount of health, so good luck trying to deal damage from it from afar. And good luck trying to deal damage, because they are really fast as well. They're one of the fastest enemies, if not the fastest enemy in the game. In short, the Archviles are a hassle to deal with. Every time I hear their sound cue telling me that they are near, a little part of me dies inside, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Thankfully, these guys are decently rare, so you hopefully won't have too much trouble dealing with them. That's not going to stop them from ruining your day though. These are only a few examples of some of the enemies. There are even more types like the Mancubus, the Chain Gunner, screw these guys, Arachnotrons, and a few other types I'm probably forgetting about. All these new enemies combined with the already existing ones will really change how you're going to traverse through the levels and approach combat sections. And that is an understatement. So, remember how I said in the last video how the game constantly keeps you on edge and on your feet? Well, imagine that, but cranked up to 11. Where do I even begin? Enemies are around basically every corner, constantly being ambushed by a whole slew of them at all times. Some of the toughest of them are all constantly showing up when you least expect. This game will test you, and I mean it will test you. It kinda already assumes you played the first game, as the game will very early on already start throwing all sorts of punches, and enemies will show up and catch you off guard if you aren't careful. Prepare to see tons of demons show up in groups all at once, wishing to feast on your flesh and make your life miserable. This is why you end up using the BFG a lot more in this game. Do not be afraid to spam this thing if necessary if you find yourself in a tight spot, which will happen to you a lot. So basically what I'm saying is that the enemy design is like Doom 1's, but on acid. Now personally, I enjoy the challenge and adrenaline rush the game gives me during these tricky situations, but I think this also plagues the game quite a bit, especially if you aren't good at shooters to begin with. It is very frustrating at times, but it does get to the point to where it is mostly your fault. The game is constantly putting you in that mindset of awareness and knowing the lay of the land to avoid being turned into a pile of flesh on short notice. So if you still haven't learned your lesson by the time the game really ramps up, then you probably deserve to hear this sound a lot. Besides, the game also introduces a new power-up called the Megasphere, which just refills your health and armor to 200% in an instant. The power-up is rare, but it does like to show up in places where you would really need it to help you turn the tide of a losing battle. Overall, in terms of just the level design itself, it is mainly an improvement, but there is also a fair share of poorly designed levels that can be frustrating to navigate. Now add the enemies in, and you have yourself a somewhat mixed bag of levels to play through, some great, some that are meh, and some that are just weird. Now I want to talk about the final boss of the game, the Icon of Sin. This boss is an okay boss with tons of demons to kill and manage throughout, but I have only one huge issue with this boss. And that's the fact that the game gives you barely any information to figure out how to kill it. Basically, what you have to do is reach the top of the area and press a button in order to activate a lift at the bottom. Then you have to ride this lift up toward the boss, pull out your rocket launcher, and aim for a big weak point on the boss's forehead. Do this 3 times and you win. Now, I want to clarify that I personally did not have too big of an issue figuring this out, but I was surprised to see that they don't give an explanation or really make it obvious where to shoot or what to use. And the only hint you really get is the box of rockets that sits on the lift, but since you don't really get to see the weak point because you can't manually look up and down, the connection is not really made here. I think a majority of people probably spend way too much time just shooting the boss directly rather than trying to aim for the weak point. Not only that, the boss spawns in a crap ton of enemies, which can make it rather difficult to stay on the platform if you don't deal with them quickly. Other than those few things, the boss is okay at best, but definitely has aged. Despite the sudden difficulty spike from last game to this game, the difficulty does go up at a steady pace, and it doesn't feel as unbalanced as the original game's difficulty since it isn't split into different episodes anymore. As I said, the levels are only split into 3 different sections now. But as you progress through each section, the game slowly gets more difficult. Honestly, I think the first section, the Starport levels, are probably the best in the game in terms of level design. For the most part anyway. Levels are the perfect length, easy to navigate, and filled with tons of secrets and goodies to find. And the enemies aren't too punishing unless you are being an idiot like I would be. The city levels, however, are definitely my least favorite, as the levels are usually pretty spacious and empty, secrets aren't as common, and you are more likely to spend too much time trying to figure out where the hell to go next. Plus, with the more spacious level design, Archviles are especially annoying in these levels, so if you're seeing an Archvile, the best thing you can probably do at that point is drag yourself to the nearest wall and RPG yourself, as that would probably be less painful than dealing with them. And the last section, the Hell levels, are pretty much just a mix between those two, although the enemy design here is definitely at its worst, and the game will throw all sorts of punches and kicks at you, so just be wary. For your first playthrough, I would highly recommend playing Hurt Me Plenty, nothing higher than that. Heck, playing on Ultra Violence for this recording was pretty brutal, and this was my 3rd playthrough of the game. And I don't even want to imagine how hard the game will be on Nightmare difficulty. Ugh. Well, this is pretty much all the game has to offer in terms of gameplay. There aren't that many improvements overall. There are some cool things they added, like the Super Shotgun for sure, and the new enemy types, even if I hate the enemy types, especially you, Archvile. Seriously, screw the Archvile. But those are the only notable differences. Either way, the gameplay loop is still fun as ever, and hey, at least there was improvements. I guess that's all that really matters. Now it's time to talk about the soundtrack. This soundtrack was also composed by Bobby Prince, and it has pretty much the same format as Doom 1, having a lot of slower paced, light tracks, while also having a lot of action-packed, faster tracks. There isn't really much I'm going to say about the soundtracks here, since it's basically the same as Doom 1, so if you want to really know how I feel about the soundtrack, then just watch that video first if you haven't already. However, I am going to highlight a few of my favorite tracks here, so take a listen. So despite all I have said throughout this video, is Doom 2 a good sequel? And well, first let's talk about what actually makes a good sequel. For starters, a sequel should keep what made the original so good. Secondly, it should try to improve any issues the original had. And thirdly, should add on to the original to justify a new installment. Now, there are definitely more factors on this, but I think these are the main three that we can all agree on. Now, does Doom 2 accomplish any of this? Well, yes and no. Now, the game does improve on quite a bit, but I don't think it is enough to justify this sequel. It did definitely add quite a few new additions, which are great, but again, I don't think it is enough. And the issues I had with the first game sometimes feel worse in this one, which sucks. So, overall, my answer is well, it's pretty debatable whether you'd want to call this a good sequel or not. However, that does not mean that this is a bad game. No, this is a great game. In fact, I think I like this game better than Doom 1, in my opinion. With that in mind, I'm going to give this game a 9 out of 10. A debatable sequel, but an enjoyable FPS shooter overall. Thank you guys for watching. Next up, we'll be doing Doom 64, which I actually haven't played yet at the time I'm recording this script, so that'll be an experience. Until then, go follow my Twitter if you want to. I say if you want to because I say a lot of dumb stuff on there, but I also post updates. But if you're just specifically looking for updates, you can also just follow my Instagram where I just post mainly my uploads. Let me know in the comments what you thought or how it can improve, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.